Accurate. Okay, last but not least, we have Huang Kaiwen, GovTech Associate Software Engineer, Product and Engineering, to talk about one of Singaporeans' favorite apps, parking.sg, and how the team gets the app done from prototype to production. Now, if you want to get to know him better, it says here you should invite him for coffee, soccer, or powerlifting. But right now, I'm just going to invite him on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Kaiwen.
Oh, you want the...
Hi everyone, good evening. It's been a long day and this is the last talk for our GovTech DevCon. I'm Kaiwen, I'm a software engineer and I'm from the team Open Government Products. And today the talk I would like to be sharing with all of you is parking.sg prototype to production. So without further ado, the first problem that we all are familiar with is parking coupons. Parking coupons, they have actually been around for a long time. Do you know for how long? Actually, from 1980, parking coupons were around. 1980, so it's been more than 30 odd years. Well, Singapore has changed so much in those 30 years. Even the whole landscape have changed, but we are still using parking coupons. So parking coupons are also quite a hassle to use. You have to poke those little small holes. If you did not put enough parking coupons, you're stuck in a meeting, you know you're going to get fined. So we were thinking e-payments were so common nowadays, and everyone has a smartphone. So why don't we use our smartphones to pay for parking? And that was what we did. So I'm going to show you a video. So that was the introduction of what we did. Basically, our app does three things. The three things are you can pay for parking using your phone, and you can extend for your parking remotely without going back to your vehicle physically. And lastly, you get a refund when you go back to your car, you end the parking session, and that's a big win over coupons because now you get per-minute parking, unlike parking coupons. How was the public's response to our application that we built? Well, the response was pretty good. 4.2 stars for the iOS App Store, 4.1 stars for the Google Play Store, and most of the reviews were 5 stars. People were pretty glad and pretty happy with the app we built. And I'm going to share with you one of our favorite reviews. This was from the Google Play Store. So this person was really dramatic. He was sitting in the coffee shop, drinking coffee and then seeing the parking warden coming. So the most favorite thing, what we like most about this is that He said, 2 taps, 10 seconds, 5 stars. That is precisely testament to how easy the app is used and what people loved about it. And we are really happy to receive such comments from the public. So next thing I would like to be sharing with you, how we did it, which would be split up across 4 phases. And these are the 4 phases. And this is the timeline that we took all the way from September 2016 to October 2017. And as I share with you these phases, what I'll be doing is sharing some specific events that happened in them, and how it actually extrapolated to present day, how it impacted the final product. First thing, I'm going into prototyping. Now this is the prototype, the first driver app. Well, it's hardly an app. It's not even an app. What you're looking at here is just a Firebase real-time database. Basically, it's just a website for Firebase. You go to the website, you key in the parking session into the database. That's it. Dead simple. And this here is the enforcement app. Just you take the camera, you take a picture of the vehicle license plate, it checks against that database, and it just tells you whether that vehicle is currently valid or not valid. Very, very simple. What we did was, it's basically open source and free stuff. And we use OpenALPR for the license plate recognition, a free service online. Just call an API, tells you what is the license plate. Firebase, the real-time database, all free. It's basically less than 1 day's worth of work. We like to do this because we like to prototype before pitching. It makes your argument that much more powerful. If I was to share with you a concept just through a deck of PowerPoint slides, it's not that powerful, because to many people, seeing is believing. When they can touch something, when can feel something, they know what is the idea you're talking about for themselves. And that is what we often do, prototype before pitching. One of the earlier things that we did was that, well, we are engineers, we are product designers, we didn't know what was the life of the enforcement flow of a parking warden doing her job. So we went down and with one of the agencies, URA, worked with her, one of the enforcement officers, and sort of found out what was her workflow and how did she do her work checking each vehicle, and also got to see the little handheld device that she uses to print out parking fines, how did it work, what did she need to do. One of the key realizations that we found out from this was that optical character recognition was way too slow. Because this parking warden, she had more than 20 years of experience. She was really, really good at her job. She just walked to each vehicle, spent 1 to 2 seconds, and she was able to figure out whether that vehicle was parked validly or not. That was mind-blowing to us, because as we were thinking, one of the big wins was that, well, it's quite hard for you to even decide how many coupons you want to put on your car dashboard. You need to figure out which hole to poke. You need to be careful not to poke the wrong hole. Think of how much money to spend. But to her, she just walked to the vehicle, spent just 1 to 2 seconds, and she could tell, aha, it's correct. So it broke our misconception that actually optical character recognition was already too slow. You take that camera, squat down at that vehicle, take a photo, it was already slower than her. So we scrapped that idea. What we did was that instead of checking each vehicle one by one, how about we push all those vehicles in that car park right to the parking warden? So we thought of this. Instead of querying for each vehicle whether it's parked validly, we sent a whole list to them, which is the car park that the enforcement officer was at. And we actually sorted them by the lot numbers. And this is how we moved on to the next phase, the alpha trial. Phase 2, alpha testing. Now, how do you start an alpha test? There are so many car parks in Singapore. So many of them, actually, we only started with 1 car park. How did we choose this 1 car park? This is the MND car park, Ministry of National Development. Well, we chose it because it was basically the place we were having our meetings. And who were the 10 participants at the start? The people in the meeting room. So really dead simple, start small. And this is sort of the infrastructure for the alpha trial. I'll be walking through them. First, we have our source code hosted on GitHub. And we use Heroku, which is a platform as a service, to pull our code and build that server. Next thing, you have the driver app that people would use, because you can now no longer just use a database for people to key in, right? So here's the driver app. It was built using React Native for both iOS and Android. It was built using simple things, just really stock components, fuss-free, no frills, minimum animations. And the driver actually just keys in the credit card number. The credit card number is actually a mock credit card number that we gave them. That mock credit card number is sent to our payment provider, Stripe. And then Stripe returns a payment token back to the driver app. Using that, the driver app sends that payment token to our servers to make payment for parking. We verify it again with Stripe. And once payment is verified, your parking session is now live on the database. Now, when the parking enforcer walks in the car park, sees your car, and there is no parking coupon, instead of issuing a fine, looks at the enforcer app that we gave, selects the car park that she is in, and then it pushes, and then it checks against the database and tells the parking warden, these are the cars in that car park, and she checks whether your car is one of them. So now we have a whole flow of the driver to the enforcer. How should we distribute the application? Obviously, through the App Store and Play Store. No, that's not what we did, actually. Because there is a long and tedious process to do that. To actually publish an app on the App Store and Play Store, you need to have your confirmed app name. You need to sort out the legal things. And you also have to go through reviews and approvals for each version of your app, which is really not optimal in such an early phase. What we did was that we built the app. For Android users, we sent them manually the APK installation files. And for iOS users we just went to them, sat side by side with the person, took their phone, plugged it into my laptop, and installed the app on their phone. That was how we distributed the app. And for the enforcers, we actually had a bunch of phones in our office which we used for testing. We actually gave them like an enforcement kit, which is what you see on the picture on the right. So it's a battery pack and with the enforcement app loaded. So that was the enforcement kit that they could use. Now, a lot of these things are actually quite non-scalable and a lot of manual work. And you might be wondering why we're doing all this. And shouldn't we be worrying about polishing? Shouldn't we be worried about maintainability, scalability, and analytics? Actually, it turns out that at this point of time, you're not worried about any of them at all. Because at this point of time, all you want to do is to get the first working version of your application out. And first working version here is really very simple. If a person doesn't put a parking coupon, if he uses your app, he doesn't get fined. That is the first working version. And even with such a simple trial, alpha trial, we got a bunch of really useful feedback. This is the feedback that we got, and I'm just going to walk through with you just 3 of the feedback. First, the app is easy and convenient to use. Basically, you know when you park with parking coupons, this is the parking coupons. There is actually quite a thought process to it because parking is usually 60 cents for 30 minutes. You have to choose the correct amount you want to pay, poke the correct holes, and that's not it. That's not just it. Because turns out if you want to park for a longer duration, there is a cheaper amount that you can actually use, such as whole day parking coupons, $12. It enables you to park on the next day, 7 a.m. if you're parking for long enough. And if you're parking for night parking, you can use the night parking coupon, the green color one on the right, $5, cheaper than if you were to use them one by one. So we thought about how to simplify the process, and we were wondering, how should we calculate the parking duration for the users? We could directly follow the coupons, how the coupons work, which is block coupons. Problem with that is that when you use it, coupons, you tear the coupons if you're back to your vehicle early. You have a bunch of wasted minutes, which, well, too bad. Now, if we do that, it's not nice. But how about just make our app do a start-stop? We often get this question now even. Well, if you go with a start-stop, say start your parking, and when you go back to your vehicle, end your parking, it will work most of the time. But it will not work when you forget to end your parking session. Or let's say you lost your phone, well, your battery is flat, or let's say the reception is just poor. And then it turns out now you owe an infinite amount of money. And that is not good, both for the user and for the agencies itself. Because now you have to deal with appeals. People will be telling you, hey, I lost my phone. Can you not charge me so much? This and that. So that's not optimal. Instead, what we ended with is a block and refund method, which is a hybrid of the 2 methods above. Basically, you upfront choose a duration, and then if you're back to your vehicle early, we give you a refund for the remaining. With this system, without even explaining anything at all, straight away as a user, you know that, well, if I forget to end my parking session, all that I'm liable for is the initial amount that I selected. The next feedback that I'd like to point to is keying in lot number is a hassle. Well, we thought that keying lot number was a good thing because now we can sort the enforcement list. Key in the lot number, and then enforcers will be able to sort the parking sessions by the lot numbers. But it was really a hassle because what about raining? When it's raining, the person gets out of the car, takes a look at the lot number, it's going to be in the rain. Or let's say park the vehicle over the lot number, then I can't see the lot number. So it's a hassle that we removed, that we figured out in the alpha trial. The last thing I'd like to share is able to start parking when parking scheme is 0. What this means is that, well, there were certain car parks where parking is free from 10 p.m. to 8:30 a.m. Well, if you use our application, let's say you arrive at the car park at 11 p.m., it's the free parking period. You attempt to start a parking session, our app will tell you, hey, free parking available. No need to park, no need to pay. Well, we thought we were doing a service to the user, but what if you want to park from 11 p.m. all the way to 9 a.m.? We were thinking, well, the user just needs to wake up at 8:30 to start parking, right? Well, not very good, obviously. So this problem doesn't happen for parking coupons because for parking coupons, you choose what time you start parking. Well, should we follow the parking coupons then? That's not what we did. Here's the solution that we did. Well, if you choose 30 minutes of parking, at 11 p.m., the app tells you free parking available and does not allow you to proceed. However, if you choose 10 hours of parking, then the app allows you to proceed because the parking session now ends at 9 a.m., but we only charge you for 60 cents, which is just half an hour of parking. So now we have simplified the process down to the user just decides once he parks his car, what time am I trying to park until? And just over this weekend, on Sunday, there was a user who sent in a feedback to us. Here's what this user said. She was actually quite unhappy. She was saying that, hey, I parked my car, and then when I went back to my car, I noticed a signboard saying that, well, operating hours are from 8:30 a.m. onwards. So she was thinking that we cheated her money. Well, you allowed me to park, but parking starts from 8:30 a.m. onwards. Then she was asking, surely you could do better, right? Well, here's my reply to her. The app does include everything. If parking is free before 8:30, it allows you to proceed. If it doesn't do so, you have to remember to start parking afterwards when the operating hours kick in. And explain to her if the situation where parking is not allowed before 8:30, such as if it's reserved, then the app will not allow you to start parking, and explain that we want to make it simple for the user, such that the only thing the user needs to do is think of what time you want to park until. And she was delighted. She was happy that, and told us that a lot of thoughts have gone into this app, which is because of our testing in alpha trial. So here's a bunch of feedback that we got from alpha, which really gave us this validation and direction in building the application. So that kind of wraps up the alpha testing. Next, I'll go into the beta phase. The goal of beta is for focus and stability. Remember just now I told you these 4 things that you did not have to worry? Now, we have to worry for 3 of them: maintainability, scalability, and analytics. This was the app infrastructure in alpha. It consisted of this. But next, this infrastructure is actually currently our production infrastructure. If we put it into perspective, side by side, there is a huge difference. Well, in alpha, we didn't have to care about maintainability. What if the load is high? You don't have to worry about all those things. But for beta, we are trying to build what would be the launch product for your application, so you have to worry about all these things. For instance, in alpha, we made use of mock payments. For beta, we're going to test out real payments. In alpha, we built code that basically you can write and throw them away and rewrite them. But for beta, we are trying to build something which is you need to plan and build ahead for the system to launch. And next, in alpha, you want to limit the test environment, keep it small, and gather user feedback quickly. But for beta, you want to test your application to the limits and make it as close as possible to a real working scenario when you launch it. So basically, there's so much work to do. And how do you do it? Main thing is that you need to prioritize what to build first. So this is a simple cost-benefit diagram. And well, basically, there are things that you certainly want to avoid, which is in the bottom right corner. These are the things that we figured out are low benefit and hard to build. Once you start going into e-wallets and user account systems, you sink in a lot of development time, but that doesn't bring much benefit to the end user of the parking application at all. These were things we avoided absolutely. And when you put together all the features that you need to do, to this list of features, what you need to do with it is to say, we'll give each of them a priority. And these priorities range from P1 to P3s, and for the P1s, we say that they are things that are launch blocking. These are things that are core. They are core to your application. Without it, the application will not be a good app. Second is P2s. P2s are the things that are important. You really would like to have them, such as to generate receipts for motorists when they use the app. You like to have them, but they are certainly not launch blocking. You can still launch the application without it. And finally, we have P3s. P3s are the things that, just nice to have. They are like the little cherry on top of your ice cream. And these are things such as, multiple payment modes. We launched the app with Visa and Master only. Only recently, we added the ability for user to pay using Amex. So P3s are nice to have. Why do you need to do this? You need to actively filter and prioritize again and again and again. Because if you look at this list, P1s is something like able to extend your parking session. If you were to just flip this list around, you make all the P3s be the P1s. You build this thing opposite. You'll figure out that, well, you have spent a lot of effort building a system, but that system is of no use to the user at all. And if you do that, if you don't give them a good priority that makes sense, your project will die. Projects die not because they're too small, but they get too big. So the next thing that happened in the beta was that as we went through and scaled up again and again, on the 4th of September 2017, an incident happened. Let me share with you that incident. Well, HDB was angry with us. At that time, we were no longer using those little enforcement devices that we passed to them. They had their handheld devices, and that was already integrated to our servers. For some reason on that day, the enforcers, their system could not reach our servers. There was no reply from our server for some reason, and they were thinking to themselves, well, should I issue a fine or not a fine? And this is the one they chose, fine. So they were angry with us and told us, hey, we couldn't contact your servers, and this resulted in a couple of users getting the wrong fines. So what happened, the result of this incident is that we all sat down together, HDB, URA, and us. We had a long discussion and decided that, well, in such a situation, what happens is that if there is no response from our servers, don't give a fine. And this was really important because we had a consensus that, well, since we want to move people to digital parking, we want to benefit people, then in the case where there is any problems with the system, any system-wide errors, any problems where they can't contact our servers, you don't issue a fine. Why am I sharing all this? Well, on the 27th of February this year, parking.sg went down. It was not available for use for Android users for about 6 hours or so. I'll not go into the details here, but basically, because of that experience that we had in beta, we were clear what to do in such an event. And this is the Facebook post that we made when it was down. And to date, it is the most popular Facebook post that we ever made on our account. Why? This thing. We will suspend enforcement actions for all Kopon car parks until the issue is resolved. Basically, this is the comic that sums it up. We love this comic strip, and we even printed out and put it in our office. Well, turns out that e-services, they do go down at times. But what you see here, parking.sg, free parking, this here did not happen by chance. It is because we figured it out in the beta testing that sometimes things will go wrong, things will go down, and we were prepared to minimize the inconvenience to the users. So instead of outrage, we minimized the inconvenience to the users, and they were all happy about it. Another thing that I'd like to share is about staging your testers, how we treat beta testers. Now, we treat our beta testers seriously because they are users who are willingly testing out your app. They know that your app is not complete yet. There could be bugs. There could be problems. There's testing for it, and we want them to give us feedback. However, most people do give feedback only once because it's quite tiring to keep on giving feedback again and again. And this is the growth of our beta users over time, from the time of May 2017 all the way to August 2017. And what is interesting about this, which is the next point I would like to talk about? Well, if you have enough feedback, address it before adding more testers, because you don't want to waste potential testers by adding them all in one shot, right at the beginning. Now, back to the slide that I showed you. What's interesting is that you can see all those flat parts. Those flat parts are the times where we were not adding more testers because we have identified issues with our application. We were fixing bugs that has already been floated up. So we were fixing them, working on them. And only after we have completed working on them, when we want to test them, that's the only time where we add in more testers into the workflow. And then after August 2017, which is what you see here, things were pretty much stable. We have cleaned up most of the bugs, and then that was the time we really scaled up the number of users, added them rapidly, and then about end September we had 15,000 beta users, and this was across about all the car parks in the CBD area, and all these beta testers were using our app. So towards the end of the beta trial, we do have a bunch of things that we have not completed, but they were things that are not launch blocking, such as motorcycle parking, map selection of car parks, and the ability to export your parking history. But it was fine. We have no more launch blocking errors, so that's how we moved on to the next phase, production. Finally, I'm talking about polish. The goal of production, you have to polish it and get it ready. And a lot of that is down to having a good UI. Now, if you look at this, the main screen of the beta and launch version, they actually are similar, but they have the same functional components, just that the launch screen, it is much easier to read, and it's more aesthetically pleasing. Take, for instance, the map. The map is actually the same, absolutely the same. Now, you have the vehicle portion. It's the same, but for launch, we're using an icon. Same thing. Same functional components, but just nicer to use, nicer to read. Same thing with the car park selection. Same thing with the parking duration. From being very wordy, we changed it to a simple component with 3 things that summarizes it. For the primary actions that the user needed to take, that was the change. As well, for the extend screen, from a dialog that was smaller, we changed to a big screen. And again, from a very wordy UI, we changed it to something simple. For the buttons, we changed it up to this. And so functional components are the same, but a lot more readable, a lot more usable for the end user. And another thing about UX is that we want to keep a simple language, keep things consistent. What I mean is this. If you look across all the screens of the application, there's this thing, this triangle that you see. Basically, it's the duration, time, and cost for that parking session. We're using that exact same thing across this screen for consistency. Same thing about the parking location. It's the same thing that you see across the screens, your vehicle information, and the primary action is all the same button color. And by keeping things consistent, there are less things that a user needs to learn, and straight away they know, they just have to learn a little bit and they know how your app functions. Another thing that we thought about after launching the app in production was that we were thinking, how could we reduce credit card processing fees? Well, we would charge credit card processing fees in this manner. For each charge that we process, every new parking session, every extension, there was a charge that we process, and there was a fee associated with it. And if you were to add them all up, this was a fee that you had to pay. However, if you were to take all those charges, don't process them yet. Take all those charges, and then you take an extra step, combine all those charges together into one larger charge, then you process that charge. It turns out that the fees that you were going to pay is much lesser. How much money did we save? Well, from the time of January to March 2018, if we were to take each charge and process them separately, we would be paying an amount of 170,000 just for credit card processing fees. But because of this system change that we did, instead of doing that, we only spent 96,000. And this gives us a cost saving of more than half if we were to charge if we were to process each charge separately. And this is great because the system savings actually add up over time as the system runs. Now, I mentioned earlier that we needed to take the individual charges, add them all up, and then process them separately. So there was a point in time that we had to go into our database, look at the charges, and then process them. So as engineers, we were thinking, what is the best time to do it? Well, we thought, how about daily 2 a.m.? Because that's a time, when the load of the server is the lowest. Everyone is sleeping. No one is parking their cars. Low load, best time. So we did our batching, did the job. But what happened was that there were people who set up SMS notification from the banks. So they received the notifications. They look at the notification, hey, you had a charge. And then what happened is that a lot of them were angry. Well, and then when they send feedback to us, hey, what is this? What happened? Is there a hacker deep in the night hacking my card? Parking.sg is not secure. They contacted us, and then problem is that we were not very responsive. Maybe it's a weekend or early in the morning, and we were all sleeping. So instead of that, we changed things up. Instead of doing it daily at 2 a.m., we changed up to how about doing it at 9 a.m. on working days only. So the same flow happened. But this time, when the user received the SMS, looks at it, sends it to our team, and our team was able to respond to them very quickly. And now, we have a happy user. So what am I trying to say? Often technology is not the solution to problems. Sometimes it's the processes that causes problems. And once you change up that process, the problem evaporates. Now, some of the closing thoughts that I have is that we believe in doing small things well. You remember at the start of the talk, I said our app does 3 things. Calculate fees, extend, get a refund. But the fact of the matter is that our app actually does a lot more things. Which is this. There are parking notifications. You can see where is the nearest car park to you, stores your parking history, this and that. But without these 3, all these things that you see, they are useless. They are of no use. And to date, the number of parking sessions that people have made is more than 10 million. And the amount that we have refunded back to users is more than $2 million. Here's what we think of all these things, other things. They are actually not important. Because what is core is that we want people to remember, park digitally, save money. Next thing that I'd like to talk about is focusing on the next concrete step and avoid analysis paralysis. Because in the business of technology, when we build things, we are really exploring the unknown. And many a times, there could be stakeholders or business owners who really overthink and want you to overthink and overplan about, hey, what if this thing will happen? What about that? Do we need to prepare for a certain situation? Well, instead of over-worrying, what we believe in is test and iterate. Find out what you didn't know. Next thing is that you can do a lot with a small team. And this is the team that did parking.sg. Actually, at any point in time, there were only about maximum of 3 people working on parking.sg. 1 front-end engineer, 1 back-end engineer, and a product manager or designer who is helping us. And of course, a whole lot of help from M&D and URA and HDB. And with that, I'd like to also do a little pitch for our team there. You can check out open.gov.sg. We believe in doing things for the public, do small things well, and work on real problems. And one of the other things that I'm sharing is, for closing thoughts, is, that will be it. So finally, I'm going to open the floor for any questions. You can ask me anything from about the app, about the process that we took. Questions? If there are no questions, anyone? Yeah.
So you mentioned that your pricing mechanisms are such that the users get a refund if they suspend the parking earlier. And I was curious to know, how did you come up with such a dynamic? For example, in the backend, there must be algorithms that are running. So, and usually these are informed by the business. So did you discover these things during the alpha trial or during the beta trial, that how you should structure your pricing mechanisms to best serve the needs of the users and even delight them, probably?
I'm not absolutely sure what you're asking about, but just going to share what I think of it. Basically, for each car park, the agencies, URA and HDB, they already had the pricing for each car park. So let's say this car park is 60 cents for 30 minutes. So and then they already had those gantry systems, and those were already by per minute. So all we did was that, well, 60 cents for 30 minutes, we just changed them to per minute, it's 2 cents. That was how we did the calculation.
Okay, so if a user suspends the parking earlier, is the same model that's been applied to give the refund to the user, right?
Yep. So
Okay.
basically, when you actually end a session, it actually modifies the end time. Yeah.
Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah. Sure. Anyone else?
Hello.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask a bit more about the when the project was started, or when this product was started. How did you conceptualize what your problem is, and how do you convince the stakeholders that this problem is big enough to solve?
I think is the main problem. How did we convince the stakeholders? Well, to be honest, like let me show you the timeline. Let me just change it up. So if you look at the timeline, you see that our initial prototype started in September 2016. There's actually a big gap till we started the alpha trial. Actually, we did spend quite a lot of time working with the stakeholders. That was kind of not mentioned about in the talk that I just gave. But we spent a lot of time working with them, sitting down with them, trying to convince them, and showing them what were the benefits that we could do. And only around in sort of like December 2016, that was when we actually got like a solid buy-in, and then that was really when we started to build and prepare for the alpha trial. So it did take quite some effort back and forth, and one of the things that actually happened in October to December in 2016 was there was a change in parking coupon prices. You know, the change from 50 cents to 60 cents. And that actually caused more commotion about, hey, maybe it's time we should move away from physical coupons, right? And that was kind of the things that also gave us an opportunity to do it. Yeah, does that answer your question? Okay, yeah. So we do have a lot of time for Q&A. If you would like to ask anything, you can ask us right now. Otherwise, if you'd like to talk to me or any of my team, we're going to be around here. Questions? Oh, yeah.
Hi, just curious about your team size. Would you say it would have been faster or slower with a larger team, or was 3 really the ideal?
We haven't actually reached our mass where let's say we add more engineers or designers, we'll get slower. So 3, we could probably still add some more, yeah, but not too much. Maybe just so actually because there were only 2 engineers, one front end, one back end. Actually, there was quite a lot of overlapping work as well. So I mainly did the front end. But it doesn't mean that I don't know what happened at the back end. We had a lot of overlapping responsibilities, and so we reviewed each other's code, especially for the back end. So we could definitely use maybe 1 or 2 more engineers to make things move faster, but maybe I'd say 2 more is the max, so maybe 5 engineers. We had 1 designer, and sort of sometimes the designer actually doubled up as the product manager. Sometimes the designer was done designing, and then we had we needed more help to push the project forward. So we needed more pushing from the product manager instead from the designer. Yeah. So maybe 5. So we have 2 engineers. Maybe we have 2 engineers. So maybe 2 more engineers will be the best. Maybe 4 engineers. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, one question. Right now in Singapore, we do have car parks with parking coupons and parking.sg, but there are also car parks that we use nets for the IU in-vehicle unit system. So in the future, will we be seeing more car parks with using the parking.sg platform or the nets with the IU system?
This is actually not decided by us, which is GovTech. So it's up to HDB and URA. But just to elaborate a bit, one of the limitations of those, also why do we still use coupons? Because most coupon car parks are those parallel parking car parks. Sometimes you see them on the street sides, say, especially in the town. And these are places where you can't actually like cordon away with a gantry. So those things actually remain as coupon parking. So that was why you still have quite a significant amount of coupon parking car parks. Whether they would move the gantry away to maybe parking.sg, that is something that will be decided by HDB and URA. Questions? Yeah.
Very brief question, Kaiwen. So, can you maybe just give a brief overview of the stack that you used?
Yeah,
Front end,
sure.
back end. Yeah.
So the front end is done using React Native. So for both Android and iOS. For the back end we use. Let me go to the infrastructure. This one.
Okay.
So let me just zoom in. It's not very clear, but okay. First thing, Elastic Beanstalk. Basically, that's what we use. AWS Elastic Beanstalk. What it does is that it helps us to scale our EC2 services, manage our EC2 services. We use DynamoDB for our parking sessions instead of, in Alpha we use Firebase. DynamoDB provides us with very good concurrency control and scalability. And we use Travis for our build and deployment. Other things that we use would be, we also do backups on Google. We use S3 to do certain admin functions. We have a read replica as well for us, for the admins to use. That is more or less the stack. We also use Cloudflare for DDoS protection. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I see that you have used Elastic Beanstalk.
Yeah.
Why haven't you used Lambda or serverless kind of thing?
Why we haven't used Lambda? Certainly, actually, it's possible to use Lambda. And why we started off with Elastic Beanstalk was EC2 was something that we were pretty familiar with. And another thing about Lambda is that at that time, in those earlier phases, we were using our server to do some longer jobs as well. And Lambda would not support that. Another thing would be that our server actually does some in-memory caching, such as for the fast retrieval of car parks, for instance. So the app actually calls the server to get car park information. It's a pretty long list. Things about 2 megabytes, and this is actually cached in the server. So that, I hope that answers your question. Does it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have questions? We have time. Otherwise, if there are no questions.
Hi, just asking for maybe the reaction of the car park aunties when they actually tried the trial. Did you actually reduce number of car park aunties?
We didn't have much. To be honest, we didn't have that much direct contact with the car park aunties. after we like went on the ground with them, walked with them to learn, because afterwards it was more of us just like talking with the agencies, and then the agencies, they are those who hire the car park wardens. So it was kind of reduced interaction with them. And another thing to note was that, remember, we gave them the enforcement app to use, but afterwards, that was changed because instead of using our enforcement apps, they moved on to using their handheld devices, which they already use for printing parking fines. So that device actually directly calls our server. So, well, it's kind of not our application anymore. You just make use of our servers to check parking sessions. Yeah. So it's kind of the same device that they use. Yeah. Yeah. Questions? Just going to wait for 10 seconds. If no questions, anything, or you'd like to talk to me separately, it's fine. Okay, that's all. Hope you guys enjoyed the talk.